weekly PhD log, week 31. Missed the last couple of weeks because I've been rushing towards my confirmation due date. Confirmation's in for the 22nd of September, and I have to get all the paperwork in 2 weeks in advance of that, which means the 8th of September. I need to have all of my materials submitted. Then have 2 weeks to prepare a presentation. Given my skill set and professional background, that won't be a problem in the slightest. But the documentation is 15,000 words, not to mention all the little bits and pieces that need to be put through the online form. So, we're moving pretty fast. Got the first full version of that done Friday last week. Sat down with my supervisor Matteo on the Monday, ran through that. He gave me some advice on parts of it. He's going to do a more thorough review on the actual literature review elements. This week, well, I update the methodology and the purpose of those problem statement and introduction. But yeah, we're coming along. We've got 2 weeks left, basically, to get that finalised and get it in. It'll get done. A little nerve-wracking. It's funny, isn't it, how stress scales or doesn't, depending on... It's all relative, really. That whole stress threshold concept where it moves and adapts over time, but when you're not used to being stressed, like this year, compared to last year, then even mildly things can be distressing, as it were. I'm fine, incidentally. Just plodding away at it, just got to keep things into perspective. It's the only thing I'm doing at the moment, which is weird. Well, it's not the only thing I'm doing, but it is by far the largest thing I'm doing at the moment. So, here we are. So, extant questions currently on the table. First, Matteo recommended that I start in with a case study or an example, because my research question mashes together a lot of different fields: computational sciences, countering violence extremist work, and also AI, and also ethics. So, yeah, in order to illustrate how those things all fit together, what better way than with a case study? I originally was going to use the Bondi shootings, but as Matteo quite rightly pointed out, that doesn't actually, or as yet, has not resulted in any AI interventions, though it does illustrate the two of the elements. So we're going to look at the Christchurch shootings instead. The shootings give a good CVE example. The use of AI in that space, the ethics related to that is very clear. And the use of AI is now emergent in that space. One example I found there with Throughline in the Christchurch call, using an agentic AI as a means of identifying or detecting people using AI tools for potentially extremist uses or flags or risks, and then intervening and attempting to redirect them in a pseudo-counselor kind of way over to a list of pre-organized psychological services that can help with de-radicalization. Now, that takes a lot of persuasion. There's obvious benefits for doing it with an AI because it's always on, it doesn't get tired, doesn't have compassion fatigue, so on and so forth, and it's cheap relative to employing the number of people you would need to monitor all ChatGPT use at all times in New Zealand. The downside is that you're asking it to undertake a very, very touchy moment. Even if it's not very long, it still needs to get them over to a different service. And it could backfire if the person feels like they're being condescended to or not listened to, or it's a trap, or if it's, government surveillance. It could all backfire, and you could end up with a situation where it gets worse. So it's a perfect case study, really. Even though the service hasn't actually been implemented yet, the concept is well developed, is well underway to being implemented. It's nearly there from the interview I ran with them a while back. And, so that's a start. Second question, the literature review elements sort of speak for themselves. I've read them. I have an opinion on them. I wrote that down. Then what else is there to say? I'm sure Matteo may challenge some of my interpretations and critical review aspects, which is kind of the point, but that's fine. That just might need a small rewrite. At the end of the day, the literature's been reviewed, and it's sitting there. The other element, though, is the methodology. I've got to figure out how to gather the data that I will need to accomplish the research question. So we started with interviews to establish a governance baseline. How is AI currently being used in the CVE space, and how is it being governed currently, as well as how could it ideally be governed, which gives us an idea of the practicalities. That's fine. That's not a problem. For some ridiculous reason, I'd forgotten that I need to put write the ethical framework into the methodology. I don't know, it just seems so self-evident. I sort of thought of the methodology as the parts I need to accomplish in order to contribute to that, forgetting that I need to actually do it, or say that I'm going to do it. I'm not really sure what to say about that beyond I will write an ethical framework drawing on literature and the interviews and so forth, but, I've written that down, so that's fine. We were talking about using the Delphi method for that, which is where you interview a group of people up front, but then you re-engage them periodically throughout the research project to get, sort of insights as you go, which is beneficial, but as Matteo points out, is perhaps overly complex for something that could just be replaced by a reference group, which is something I want to do anyway. I want to do a human rights reference group to make sure that to stress test the framework, basically, to see if it can be abused, and also to make sure that diverse perspectives are incorporated automatically into that framework to ensure that I don't miss anything that I might otherwise have just simply not been aware of. Always a risk with ethics. That's where the feminist care ethics aspect comes into it. Good example of this, for example, I am not LGBTQ+, etc. I'm not gender diverse in any way, etc., etc. I'm just straight white cis male. Hooray for me. But that means that while I can try to be aware of how AI in this space may affect those people and those demographics, I cannot be sure that I will be able to anticipate that, because it's not my world and I don't live those lives. So what do you do about that? You incorporate someone into a reference group that is from that perspective, or multiple people from different perspectives in that space, because they do, and they are. And therefore, I can get perspectives I otherwise wouldn't have. Similar with women, similar with different ethnicities, etc. You get the idea. So yeah, human rights reference group, but now what I'm thinking about doing is a second reference group looking at intended users or intended applications. So who's going to use this framework? University research panels, researchers themselves, governments writing up policy potentially, or potentially regulation, social media companies, etc. So the idea there would be have a reference to practicalities. What are they actually dealing with or actually going to do in these situations? And if the ethical framework doesn't account for that, regardless of whether they should be doing it, it's going to fail, which is the second biggest risk for this PhD, which is practical failure, basically. Like, it can be as ideal as you want. If it doesn't get used, it doesn't get used. So that's good. From there, the bigger one, I originally had it down in my methodology that I wanted to do some testing. And I've been pretty clear on this from the get-go. But as Matteo quite rightly challenged me, it's like, what do you mean by testing? And I was like, well, I want to feed the ethical framework to an AI and see if it can correctly apply it. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I don't know. It just seemed like a good idea. We're talking about governing AI. Surely it should be able... But we discussed it a little bit, and this so illustrates the benefit of an outside point of view and bouncing these ideas off other people. Because as soon as he sort of pointed that out, I was sitting there going like, that's not really that useful, huh? So what we're going to do instead is we are going to get a target group, probably university ethics reviewers, like people serving on the ethics panels at universities that say yes or no to different ideas of research, and give them a hypothetical research application and ask them to use my framework to review it and get their feedback, essentially. Was it useful? Was it easy to follow? Were there strengths? Were there weaknesses? How can it be improved? Etc. Essentially, reviewing how the framework is used in practice to see where the strengths and weaknesses are. We can also apply it to a variety of known and unknown extremist scenarios, as well as ones that we know aren't extremist scenarios. So, for example, the NSNs are extremist, obviously. So does the framework correctly identify them? If so, good. Sovereign citizens, on the other hand, are marginal, mostly not. Does it identify them, yes or no? Whereas if you look at, for example, while they are well, let's be blunt, they're ethically vile, but and very, very thick. But anti-immigration groups, for example, typically do not fall into the extremist group because they're, Berger's definition and so forth, they're not after perpetual conflict. They're after a policy solution. It's a bad policy solution, but it is an achievable policy solution, which makes it non-extremist. So, does it exclude them? So, yeah, we can potentially do that. So, that's where I'm at. I've got to rewrite the methodology section, got to tighten up the introduction. I need to then respond to Matteo's review of the literature review elements while he has a look over my updated methodology, and submit. And then I can move on to the presentation, which, so it's like 2 hours worth of work, honestly, but look, I'm really good at presentation. What do you want from me? As you can see right here. I wonder why I'm even doing these sometimes. I mean, it's broadly beneficial to keep a log of where things are at and where my thinking is at. It's certainly been useful for me as a point of reflection, but posting these on LinkedIn. Interesting idea, Gordon. Can't see that backfiring in the future. Yeah. If nothing, it shows a certain amount of self-awareness and transparency, at least as far as I would like to think. So yeah, week 31. Jeez, it's flying. Yep, I will update next week with the newest update, and then I'll update the week after that once I've actually submitted the paperwork and it's on to presentation time. Let's see how we go.